Hey, folks, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another review, and this is of what many call the best of the Universal monster movies, The Bride of Frankenstein. Once again, directed by James Whale. At first, he didn't want to do a sequel. In fact, that's what led him to doing The Invisible Man. But pretty much he said, okay, if I'm going to do a sequel, I'm going to do it my way or the fucking highway. And they said, okay. So you have the monster talk, which I believe in the Mary Shelley novel, the monster actually did talk. And you had stuff like the Dr. Pretorius character and the little people and the bottles and all this other stuff. The look of the Bride of Frankenstein, which is a great look. If you're wondering, there's the She's Alive, creating the Bride of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein archives, feature commentary with film historian Scott McQueen, and 100 Years of Universal Restoring the Classics, which is just, again, just restoring not only these films but other films for their 100-year anniversary, and a trailer gallery. Now, The Bride of Frankenstein, I do like the film. Yeah, I could say, I mean, of the stuff I've seen so far, I could definitely say I like it more than the Phantom of the Opera from the 40s. I'd probably say I like it more than the Wolfman. I like the Wolfman, but I just say I like Bride of Frankenstein more than the Wolfman. I would say I like the Invisible Man more. I like this more than the Mummy. I would say I like the Invisible Man more. I would say I like Frankenstein, the original, more. Dracula, I don't know. Just depends on my mood. Because I like The Bride of Frankenstein. I actually do think it's a really good film. But I would probably say I like the original Frankenstein more, and I know I'm alone in that because there's a lot of people who say that Bride of Frankenstein is vastly superior and it's the best. I don't feel it's the best of Universal monster movies. Again, I would say I like The Invisible Man, Frankenstein, maybe even Dracula a bit more. I haven't seen Creature from Black Lagoon, at least not all the way. I will get to it though, but and that's because there's a lot of good things with Bride of Frankenstein, but there's some stuff that I didn't care for. And I would say I like the original more, because the original, I think because the original is more of a horror story, while this one is horror, but a lot of humor as well. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. It made it different. It wasn't the same thing, I understand that. But if I prefer, like, I mean, that's not always the case for me. Like Alien and Aliens, I love Alien to death, but my favorite is Aliens, which is more of an action movie. But I don't know, in this instance, I just like the first film more than the sequel. But again, I think Bride of Frankenstein is a really good film. But like, for example, one thing I did not like was the prologue. I did not like the prologue with Mary Shelley. Weirdly enough, I think that's played by Elsa Lanchester, who also later on plays the Bride of Frankenstein. But I didn't care for that scene. That scene wasn't interesting to me. I thought it was useless, pointless. It was pretty much just this guy talking about, oh, Mary Shelley, you're so beautiful, but yet you did this story that made me scared and about cadavers and however the hell he talked and whatever he said. And pretty much, oh, that wasn't the end of the story. And like her talking gives a little flashbacks to the original Frankenstein. And then, footage of her telling it and says, that wasn't the end of the story. And pretty much her telling these two guys the story. Now, I'm not saying there's narration or stuff throughout the film, but to be honest, that prologue could have been completely cut out. It could have been completely cut out, and I didn't care for it. It wasn't interesting. Like, even the prologue in the opening of Frankenstein was a little bit interesting, because I liked the actor and how he said the lines of dialogue, and kind of made you think of how it would be in the old days of a guy warning you. We've warned you. But I didn't care for this Mary Shelley prologue. And one quick note is I like the makeup on the Frankenstein monster, but I would say I prefer the look of the. I mean, I'm fine with this look, and Boris Karloff does another great job. But if you had to ask me, I would pick the look of the original. I don't know. The look of the original to me looks better than the look in the sequel. Again, I don't mind the look of this. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm not saying it's bad at all. But I don't know, the original, maybe because he seemed a bit thinner, a little bit more gaunt, like a cadaver. He's a little bit thinner, and here is a little bit, like, I think even Britt Baker mentions, it's like in the first film, he was a starving actor, and here, since he's a better paid actor, he got a little bit more to eat. But it is not bad at all. It's just, I prefer the look that he had in the original. I just thought he looked better in the original. And Colin Clive comes back, and it seemed like he had a little bit more to do in the original. Here, he doesn't really have much to do. Uh, I mean, the more interesting character is the Dr. Pretorius character, which I liked him. I thought that actor did a good job. Ernest Thesiger. And I like the film. I know I'm saying a lot of negatives, but I do like the film. I mean, the monster's still alive, and quickly, kills this guy and kills this girl, which kind of takes a little bit away from the sympathy, but at the same time, they did try to burn him alive, so I guess I'd be pissed too. Uh, and the Frankenstein himself, Colin Clive, returns home to heal, and that's, other than that little opening of the Frankenstein monster, you don't see him for quite a bit. You don't see him for a little bit, at least 20, 30 minutes or so. Because you introduce to Dr. Pretorius, and I like the actor. I thought he did a really good job. Ernest Thesiger, probably said his last name wrong, but the Dr. Pretorius character was a really interesting character. He wants to work with Frankenstein. He doesn't want him to stop. And Frankenstein's like, no, I don't want to, but Dr. Pretorius shows him his stuff. And pretty much he shows him. First, he has this. I like this line in dialogue that he says, "To a new world of gods and monsters." It pretty much shows Frankenstein his experiments. And I don't know what to feel. Like, I like Dr. Pretorius, but I kind of didn't care for this scene because I didn't know what the point of this scene was. Because he has all these little bottles with people in them. Like a king and a queen and some fucking mermaid. And I don't understand what the point of that in the movie was. Because Dr. Pretorius says, I'll help you. But what does the little people have to do with making a Bride of Frankenstein? Because he pretty much tells them that, you have this monster that's made a female. And anytime I think of this movie, I always think of Weird Science. She's alive! Weird Science! Dun-dun-dun. I can say I like Weird Science more than the film, but I still like Bride of Frankenstein. It has a lot of stuff, good stuff going for it, but I prefer the original because I thought the original was more straightforward, and the Frankenstein monster, I thought, I don't know, just the fact that it had no music. Yeah, I thought it was more of a horror film. It was more moody and atmospheric, but again, there's good stuff about this I'll get to, but I would say the first half of the film I wasn't the biggest fan of, other than the Dr. Pretorius character. Just like the stuff with the little bottles, what was the point of them? How does that lead from him later on to helping Dr. Frankenstein? Like, what does he really bring to the table? I remember someone mentioning the Bride of Frankenstein had an artificial brain. So maybe that's why. That's what Dr. Pretorius brought to it, but it wasn't clear to me. Like how you live from these little people here. Like, what does those little people have to do with the fucking Bride of Frankenstein when you create her with Frankenstein? What does that have to do with anything? What the little people? I mean, the little people thing just. I think it was done for humor, just to be weird, but I just thought it was very goofy. I just didn't care for the shit. But he's like, hey, together we'll create a woman. I'm like, you're that horny? But no, it's like, that's why, To a World of Gods and Monsters is toast. But it's after that scene where they get back to the monster. This is where I think the film does pick up because, he's looking, the monster, Boris Karloff's looking at his reflection and hates it. There's this girl that falls off this little waterfall and he tries to help her, but these people attack him. He gets chased. I like the landscape and I like the photography, and they grab him and they tie him up and he gets put up. kind of like a little ode to Jesus, where he's like this, tied up, and they chain him up, and he gets out, and he breaks out, and ultimately that leads him to the blind old man, which I think more of young Frankenstein now when I think of this scene. But I thought that whole sequence with the old man was nice. The old man was the first to treat him very nice. Not the first, the little girl, but in the first film. But I liked the whole scene because it was touching, teaching the monster how to talk. I thought Boris Karloff did that well. You still felt sympathy for the character after all he's done. The old man treated him well. Giving him smoke good. Smoke good, and alone bad, friend good. I thought Boris Karloff did a really good job. I thought the guy who played the old man, the blind old man, did a really good job as well. I thought he had some good touching moments in that scene. Where obviously this old man, blind man, he's not only a religious guy, but he was a very lonely guy. Because, his friend is hurt, has him lie down, and he's like praying to God, thanking him for a friend. And even the monster pats his back, and some touching stuff. It wasn't too sappy, it wasn't too corny, it wasn't too silly. It wasn't silly at all. I thought it was well done. I thought, okay, this is where the film is hooking me. This is where the Mary Shelley prologue I didn't care for. I liked the Dr. Pretorius character because he was entertaining as a character. I liked the actor, but the little bottles thing, the people, what the fuck was the point of that, and how did that matter to anything in the future? And I just thought it was too goofy. And then really Colin Clive, he's just, as Frankenstein, he's just, I don't want to do this. All that stuff you have with the little people looks like black magic. I don't want to do this. So I'm glad that he's learning. He's not just jumping into it. I give props to that. But the Frankenstein monster, it's interesting. The blind man teaching him, that was some good stuff. Some villagers come to the old man's place, and they get the monster out of there, and the old man's, no, my friend. The monster escapes, and later he hides in this place, and it pretty much leads him to where Dr. Pretorius is at. And I do like this scene where, I like the actor who plays Dr. Pretorius. I thought he did a fun job. And the monster's like, friend? And he's like, oh yes, I hope so. Have a cigar. They're my only weakness. And just how he interacts with the monster, he's not scared of it, he's not afraid. He's like, oh, hello there. But I thought the actor did a really good job, the Dr. Pretorius character. He was one of the good parts of the movie. Along with Boris Karloff, did a really good job. The music, I will admit, is well done. Yeah, I don't know, for some reason I prefer the Frankenstein. Part of the reason is not having any music, because it made it a little bit more moody, atmospheric. I don't want to say creepy, but a little bit more eerie than certain stuff. But here, still though, the music is well done, especially when they unveiled the Bride of Frankenstein. It's almost like wedding bells, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, which I'll get to later on. But I really like the music in that scene. And also, I mean, the second half of the film I do really enjoy. I do really enjoy the second half of this film, because Dr. Pretorius, he's obviously the more evil of him and Frankenstein, because he wants Frankenstein to do business, and even gets the monster. Kind of to the first film. The first film, Frankenstein told the monster to sit down. Now the monster's telling Frankenstein, sit down. Must do it. And pretty much Dr. Pretorius tells the monster, go do what you need to do. And pretty much tells the monster to take Frankenstein's wife and hold her pretty much hostage somewhere. And Frankenstein's like, where is she? Dr. Pretorius, on with the monster, go, you gotta make him a woman. Otherwise, you'll never see your woman again. So I do like the fact that Frankenstein is not going right back into it. He's forced back into it, which I like that part. Colin Clive has a little bit more to do in the second half than he has really nothing to do in the first half. He has a little bit to do in the second half, which is nice. I like that the character didn't go back to square one. I like that. I like that the monster and Pretorius are forcing Frankenstein to do this. The actress they have for the Elizabeth, I thought she did a bad job. I did not like her at all. I thought the girl who played Elizabeth in the first movie was a better actress. I don't know why they got rid of her and got this girl. Also, there's this girl named Minnie who's like their maid or their servant. Una O'Connor, I think that's her name. She had a smaller role in Invisible Man. I think she's the one that was it, O Fraulein in Young Frankenstein. The one where every time she talked, you hear like a horse whinny. I thought that girl in Young Frankenstein was much better than this girl. I hated this older woman who's like the comic relief character. Like when in the beginning she sees the Frankenstein monster and goes ah. And I hated her character. She was so annoying. She was so irritating. I wanted the Frankenstein monster to choke her. Choke a bitch. I hated the mini character, the older woman maid. I don't know if she was a maid, servant, whatever. She was in too much of the film. She was fucking annoying. Didn't think she was funny at all. That character in Young Frankenstein I thought was much better. Where she was like, he was my boyfriend. That was much better in Young Frankenstein than it was in this. But pretty much they create the Bride of Frankenstein. The whole creation of that, I think, is well done. You have some nice, interesting camera angles where the camera is in a tilt and close-ups of tubes and close-up of people's faces. I thought it was well done. The second half of the film I thought was very well done. That's why I like this film, is for the second half. I just think the problems are with the first half of the film. That's just my opinion. But all that's well done. They create the Bride of Frankenstein. I think it's a really good look to it. Memorable look. Again, the music when she appears, and the sort of almost like wedding bells and such. Dun, da, 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 da. I like that music. And then she freaks out from seeing the monster, and he goes, "She hate me." I thought the turn of the monster seemed a little bit too quick. Okay, I understand she hate me. But it seemed a little bit too quick that he turned, how do I put it? The Elizabeth gets there and tells Frankenstein, come here, I'm not going to leave you. And the monster sees those two, and he goes, you live, and you stay to the Pretorius. We belong dead. And that's a good moment. You see like a tear go down Boris Karloff's face. It's a good moment, and even the bride, hisses at him. It's a good moment. It just seemed like a real too quick of a turn. Because he's like adamant of, you must make her, and you must do this. I'm surprised he wasn't, I'm kind of surprised that he let Frankenstein go. Just because his woman was there, and that's why. But it seemed a little bit too quick of a turn for me. But, I like the way it ends. He pulls the lever, pulls the lever, and it blows up the castle, and Colin, Clive, and his woman survive and go on to live out their lives. Kinda. Because I think the son of Frankenstein tells about how his father's dead or something. And so I don't know how Son of Frankenstein really links up with this film. I really don't. But I think this film does have problems. I don't think this is a perfect horror film like a lot of people have said. I don't think it's the best of the Universal monster movies. I prefer the original film. I prefer I would say I even prefer Dracula, and I prefer definitely the Invisible Man. I would just tell me Frankenstein. I prefer some of those other Abbott Costello because I grew up with those films. But this I do like. I would say I put this over the Wolfman, definitely over the Phantom of the Opera from the 40s, definitely over the Mummy. Because, again, problems I have with the film, I don't care for the first half of the film. Really, I don't care for. Mary Shelley's the prologue thought was boring and pointless and didn't need to be in there. I thought I liked the Dr. Pretorius character and his acting of the actor and the lines he said, but the little people in bottles For some reason, it made me think of the film much, much, much later on called Bad Channels. Because you had like little people, yeah, little people in these bottles and stuff, containment units, whatever. But anyway, I thought that scene was just goofy. I didn't find it funny, and I don't really see how that meant anything in the rest of the film. Just really seemed out of the blue. Uh, but and I hate the mini character, the old woman who was like comic relief type of character. I thought she was very annoying and irritating. But I do enjoy the second half of the film. Some of the little pieces of music. I like to mention when the Bride of Frankenstein is revealed, the look of the Bride of Frankenstein, the Clive's Frankenstein not going back to square one, him not wanting to do it, and having to be forced into doing this. The Dr. Pretorius character I really enjoyed. Uh, the Frankenstein monsters, his scenes with the blind old man, I thought were nice and touching. Creating the Bride of Frankenstein, I thought he had some good shots. I liked the way it was handled. And the sets I thought were well done. Boris Karloff was still good. I thought the cast, Boris Karloff and the guy who played Dr. Pretorius, the Clive, I thought they were good. Elsa Lanchester as the Bride of Frankenstein, she was fine at the end of the film. Nice look to her. Jack Pierce doing the makeup. I would say I prefer the look of the Frankenstein in the original than in this one, but I still like the Frankenstein monster's look in this. Him talking didn't really bother me too much. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Boris Karloff did a good job with that. So yeah, I do feel the ending a little bit feels a bit rushed. Because the monster's turn feels a little bit rushed, but at the same time, yeah, I do like the way it ended. We belong dead. The monster himself pulling the lever, and the tear going down his face. It just feels a little bit too rushed. But other than that, I do like the film. I think it has a lot of good things for it. I just don't think it's perfect like a lot of people say. I would not say it's my favorite, but I do like the film. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on The Bride of Frankenstein. Might be controversial, but again, I don't hate the film. I like the film. I just don't love it to death. I do think the first half has its problems and some other stuff, but again, I'm just repeating myself. But overall, The Bride of Frankenstein I do like. I did enjoy watching it. I do think it is one of the better Universal monster films in this pack. I do feel it is. I just wouldn't say it's my favorite. I do think I would say I prefer the first film over this, but it's still a good sequel. It's still a good sequel. By the way, thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you in a little bit later.